So what is really fascinating to me is then I started hearing about us, just everybody having leaky gut. And then in the last couple of years, I learned from the microbiologist Kiran Krishnan that if you have any kind of non-communicable disease, any kind of allergy, eczema, you have seasonal allergies, arthritis, almost anything is correlated with a leaky gut. Like you're going to have a leaky gut. That shocked me to pieces because that means everybody has leaky gut basically.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, nature, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Kitty Martone. From birth into her young adult years, Kitty was entrenched in the allopathic medical model, managing major health conditions. Finally, she turned to holistic healing and used that journey to empower others to teach and build a career from what they learned. Kitty is a holistic health educator, investigative health journalist, 3-time author, and podcast host. She has a background as a nutritional consultant and chef, working alongside nutritional giants such as Dr. Robert Marshall and author Donna Gates. Kitty, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Oh, hello. It's so good to be here.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I know you have a lot of experience in the nutritional space and around topics of gut health and hormone health. So I'd love to get right into it and hear more about your background and how you faced health concerns at one point in your life. And I'd love to start off by hearing more about how you used persistence in researching and implementing that alternative health and information that you were discovering from, what doctors kept telling you. So how did that ultimately save your life?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been such a journey, and I find that so many people like in this field have a similar one where they were challenged by health issues and maybe mental health, maybe physical health, maybe both. Maybe they had an accident or they have post-traumatic stress or something, and it led them to this journey of ultimately needing to find ways to heal themselves. And so I was really ill as a kid. I was always sick. I think it's really common to hear parents these days. It's way more common to hear children having the whole ear, nose, and throat, gut, picky eaters, attention deficit, chronically ill, falling victim to every kind of flu virus, you name it. Always, not having issues with not being able to keep food down or being just nauseous all the time. These things were not so common when I was a kid, but I was suffering from them. And now it's like I'm getting parents with children, and it's just pervasive. It's just so common to see this. And I was basically just doing that allopathic thing where I was, and my father was in the military, so we traveled a lot, and it was all about the hospital. The Army hospital was where I was constantly going. Army doctors, and they're great. They're just very rudimentary, and it's just like drugs, just pumping the drugs. And I finally reached a point when I was already, in my late teens and early 20s where the drugs started to have reactions on me. And then I needed drugs for those for those reactions. And so it was just this spiral of knowing that I had reached a dead end with the things that were supposed to be helping me. And it was kind of my identity to just be sick all the time. And, I moved out to LA from New Mexico. And I started to meet people like yourself, people who were talking that talk about taking responsibility for your own health and going back to the old ways of doing things and, getting introduced to chiropractors and acupuncturists. And I started I remember hearing someone say, that are you married to your illness? Like, is your illness who you are? Is being sick part of who you are? Is that what you always talk about? Is that because you're in pain or you're not well, so you're always talking about it? And it was just this revelation, like, that is who I am. I am this girl who's always sick.
Yeah.
And then my journey really began. And I met my husband, who's a chiropractor, and he's not just any chiropractor. I say this all the time. He doesn't just crack you up and send you on your way. He's like this incredible holistic human who just is all about every possible avenue of supporting wellness. So that can be, from external therapies to mental, breath work and prayer and then of course nutrition and detox and chiropractic. And he changed my life. That was it. I was on my way. I started studying it. It became my way of life. And
Wow.
and he has this demographic of people in his chiropractic practice, which are disabled children and children who are vaccine injured. This is in the past, not this current vaccine. And I started to work with these families and realized that I couldn't really do much with the conventional nutritional background that I had just acquired. I couldn't just say, hey, let's do a detox and let's do some supplements or some herbs, because these kids were not even, some of them weren't even eating normally. They had G tubes and things. So I had to get really creative, and I started to research things that could help. And I found Donna Gates, and I found Natasha McBride, who wrote the Gut and Psychology Syndrome, the GAPS diet. And I literally pursued Donna Gates. I knew she lived in LA, and I literally stalked her.
Yeah.
And we became friends. And at the time I was in culinary school as well. And I was, and I told her, how can I work for you? How can I serve you? And so I became her fermented foods chef. And I started teaching people how to make fermented foods and beverages, on her coattails, just teaching her people how to do that. And I did a course for her. Yeah, it was amazing. It was such a wild handful of years. And then I was able to use that knowledge because, a lot of her book, The Body Ecology Diet, is about remediating the guts of autistic children. And so that's how I found her. And then we became friends, and she just really helped me. That's how Healthy Gut Girl was born, was really with Donna Gates, just encouraging me to get out and do more of what I was doing. So, so here I am.
I love that. Yeah, it seems like we are not alone in that the frustration of poor health, unhealthy lifestyles, especially in today's modern society, our fast-paced world that we live in. The foods that we are eating and where they're coming from, the soil being depleted compared to generations ago. Mm-hmm. Every turn you take, it's like there's one thing after the next, not to mention all of the toxic chemicals in our environment and just that fast-paced lifestyle that I was just talking about in terms of more stress. And it seems like we've really gotten away from living that holistic, healthy lifestyle of eating real food and getting good sleep and getting enough sleep and nourishing our relationships. And I think a lot of these things are now coming to surface during this pandemic. We're realizing that the way we've been doing things, it's not working. And it's a big part of my mission with this podcast and the name of the podcast, A New Way of Living. It's not really a new way of living. It's a way of living that has been around for so long. It's just in our Western culture, we've lost sight of that and we've forgotten it. And for me, it's like, now's the time to take control of our health.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to go about it, but I think the simplest way is to take one step, and you don't have to do it all overnight. You can take one step at a time and you'll see progress over time. Mm-hmm. So
I love that. I love that what you just said, because it's really part of my whole mission is trying to get people to not look at that massive, like I always say, look at the Mount Everest that you need to get to the top of, that it's this progression. And it's really important. I think it's profoundly important when someone is trying to get well or just shift their lifestyle into this new way of living. And that is important because we burn out so quickly, don't we? And then we just want to give up. So if you just take little things and you chew on them for a while and you realize, wow, for 6 weeks, I have just been doing breath work every day and taking digestive enzymes with every meal. and I am pooping more and I am, or less, whatever the problem may be, I'm balanced more. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sleeping 2 more hours than usual. Wow. And it seems little because you're still not sleeping 8 hours, but it's 2 more hours than you were sleeping. It's those
Right.
little things that we lose sight of, that because we want that fast paced return, that ROI, we want it now. And
Mm.
so little, I think, yeah, that little step, you said it, is so profound, really.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's really interesting for me to look back at my life, even just let's say a year and a half, 2 years ago. My lifestyle was not healthy. Truthfully, it was probably very in line and in sync with many Americans, where I just ate whatever I wanted. I exercised here and there, but not really. My sleep was okay, but not great. I didn't know how to handle and deal with stress. I certainly wasn't practicing breath work and meditation. And once you start incorporating one small thing, then it motivates you to do something else.
Hmm.
And then it's just like a domino effect. And that's been my
Yeah.
experience. So,
Yeah.
um, for someone listening, if you feel frustrated, you feel like you have nowhere to go or you don't know what to do next, just start. Just start with something and let that
Yeah.
cascade into something bigger.
Yeah. Stick to it. Definitely.
Yeah. So with today's conversation, I do want to touch on gut health, and I think maybe to get that conversation started, it would be helpful to hear from you, um, starting to talk about the microbiome. So maybe
Hmm.
you can share with us, what is the microbiome? Why is it so important to our health? And what are some things that we need to be focusing on for better gut health?
Well, I've been switching how I present it. I used to do these lectures before COVID, and not lectures, just talks, and I would talk about the microbiome and I would describe it in sort of a clinical way. But I feel like people know now it's this colony of organisms and they live inside of our body, and there's 3 to 5 pounds of microbes that, govern our immune system, and nothing can really happen without their decision first. And, we're more microbes than we are human cell. But I feel like now that it is talked about so much, I feel like I want to really bite into what I think it really means and what it is.
Mm,
I honestly think that the microbiome is magic.
mm,
I think it's just so beautiful. And the so not only does every metabolic function that happens in the body happen first because a microbe or multiple microbes decide that it has to happen, but all of them speak to each other. The
mm,
ones that are in our eye, on our eyelids, and the ones on our toenails, and the ones in our colon, the ones in our mouth, they all have a chat. They're all talking to each other, and it's called quorum sensing, and it's this chemical language, and they're able to discuss what's coming down the hatch. Like if you are going to take a anti-parasitic supplement, if you're going to take an antibiotic, if you're going to eat something that is really nutritious and loaded with good things, they all have a chat about what needs to happen and where that stuff is going to go, and what if they need to launch a defense against it, or if they need to start to prepare to embrace and uptake the nutrition from it.
mm.
And it's so fascinating. So yeah, that's the microbiome in a magical little quip. There is like, it's just this beautiful, and it's on us and in us. So it's this armor, this suit of armor that we have. And the more diverse our microbiomes are, the healthier we are. And
Mm,
so this isolation and this antibacterial hand soaps and gels and all of this stuff, not going outside, sheltering in place, not getting fresh air, is the opposite of the way our bodies and our microbiomes are designed.
mm,
They crave diversity. They want, in fact, the whole planet works this way. The Amazon rainforest is exactly like this. It is 80% or so of the life in Amazon rainforest is beneficial, let's call it, and and 20% is neutral or commensal and pathogenic, like fungus and parasites and things like that. Same thing with us, 80% beneficial, 20% commensal and pathogenic. We have E. coli that live in us, we have staph, and we have pneumonia, and we have all kinds of things that are potentially deadly when out of harmony. And that is I think that should be our goal, is to, or in the back of our minds, we should start keeping harmony in our microbiomes and on us, in us and on us. And that means exposing ourselves to, gardening, the dirt, walking in nature, getting an animal, getting a pet, and, diversifying who you are with, exposing yourself to multiple types of people and shaking hands and breathing together. This stuff is like, we're one massive organism, and the healthier the more diverse it is, the healthier it is, the stronger the immunity is.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. You're speaking my language with my lifestyle. And I mentioned to you that before this pandemic, I was not living a healthy lifestyle, and then the pandemic happened, and we're hearing so much advice on what to do and not do. And that's where I realized, okay, I'm going to take control of what I can control. I'm going to get outside. I'm going to get sunlight. I'm going to get fresh air. I'm going to spend time with my dog. I'm going to see other people. I'm not going to, be reckless, but I also want to expose my microbiome to different environments and to different people, and to strengthen it naturally. So, and then in addition to that, things like breath work, and I do cold showers, and it's taking control of our health. It's boosting our immune system naturally. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's been a big part of that lifestyle. And I know you talk about something that you talk about it as the dirty lifestyle. So why is a dirtier lifestyle a healthier lifestyle for us? And then what are some of the ways that we can dirty up our microbiome?
I think that, they did a study on people who were living with livestock, like farmers, and they were checking to see the immunity. Basically, the results of the study were this: people who live on farms and exposed to livestock and that type of lifestyle had a massive, massive difference in their occurrences in allergies, in food allergies, airborne allergies, food sensitivities. They're dramatic difference compared to like city people. And that there was a few studies like that. And I just think that kind of says it all. It's like, dirty meaning, you don't want to be filthy. You don't want to be, pig pen, but you do want to, get away from this hyper focus of needing to constantly wash our hands and constantly, especially with the antibacterial and anti everything, right? Anti-life, and just kill it all, kill the germs, kill the bugs. And there's a happy place to be in there. I always use the idea of when you're making fermented vegetables. Like if you ever decide to do that, if you haven't already, the best thing to do is to make them yourself rather than buy them. And once you get the hang of it, it's so easy and it's a no-brainer. And you've got them in your fridge, and it's just the food in the fermented food is the nutritional quality is increased 100 times. So it's so incredible for you. And but when you make it, and this is part of that magic I was talking about before, of course wash your hands, but I wouldn't sterilize the house. I wouldn't be in there with a face visor and gloves on and boiling and bleaching everything. You just wash your hands and have your family or your spouse or your partner in the room, and you just you squeeze those vegetables with your hands together, and your animals nearby, your children are nearby, whatever. Basically, you're infusing those vegetables with your bacterial load, with your microbes. Mm-hmm. And the microbes that are already on the plant, that let's say you're doing cabbage, for example, the plantarum and all the bacteria that are already on those plants are communing with yours, and they start to, this is the magic. And people are always like, what? This has already been proven, and we can talk about that if you want. But they literally know what their purpose is. They know that cabbage is going to be eaten. And now you've introduced your microbes. They know it's going to be eaten by you now. And so now they customize the product. They customize that food to what it is you need. So if you made it in your house and I made it in my house, and then we had it assayed, we had it checked to see what the nutritional content was, they're going to be vastly different. And that is epic to me. That's just, that's medicine, that's God's medicine. And so you eat that food and it's like, providing you with what it is you need. And so you don't want to sterilize yourself in that case, would you? You want to introduce those microbes. And there's something called competitive inhibition, I believe is the name, scientific term, where, people are like, what about the mold? And what if I happen to have something gross on my fingers? And what happens? All these ideas of filthiness and infection. Well, when you have the majority, this again goes back to the harmony of the 80-20 concept in the Amazon forest and in our microbiome, the good guys outnumber the bad guys. And they can kill off pathogens. So yeah, if you open your jar of ferments and there's a little mold on top, you scoop it out. Done deal. It's fine. As long as the rest of it is vibrant and beautiful and crunchy, it's going to be perfect. So we have to get it out of our minds that germs, And so, have you ever heard of the Books of Anastasia, the series Book of Anastasia?
I don't think I have. Can you enlighten us?
It's okay. I'm waiting for the series. I'm purchasing the series, but it was read to me. Some excerpts were read to me that I'll never forget a while back. It's this, I believe a Russian woman who lived off the land, and she would plant a tomato seed. And before she planted it, she would suck on it for a little while. And then she would plant it. She would infuse that seed with her own microbiome, with her signature. And that tomato plant then produces what it is she needs for, for her wellness, for her body. It's maybe low in vitamin C. So that tomato's got a little bit of extra this and a little bit more of that. And that sounds like craziness, but it's completely proven now. We know that this is how it works. So the more sterile our food is, the more we buy things packaged and processed. And, it's hard to grow for everyone to grow their food, but you can grow some things, basil in your kitchen window. Just like that's the concept behind a dirty lifestyle. It's more, another word might be earthy lifestyle, right? Just communing with nature lifestyle.
Yeah. So what are some things we can do to... You talked about the fermented vegetables. Like what, for anyone listening, that they want to incorporate that into their life more, where it's like less sterile food. What can we be doing to bring that into our homes and bring it into our kitchens and onto our plates? Are there any practical steps?
Yeah, that first place to start is definitely, it's super simple. You just need a couple of heads of cabbage and some salt and some fresh water. And even then, it doesn't even have to be organic cabbage, and it doesn't have to be special water. If all you have is access to tap water, then great. Be grateful that we have that, right? Because those microbes can actually break down the pesticides. They can break down the fluoride. It's wonderful what they can do. Can they eliminate it entirely? Maybe sometimes. Maybe the healthier that cabbage is, maybe it can. And the healthier that bacteria is, it probably can. But it certainly reduces the effects of the toxins that are in that. So, and then I have a course on my website. I also have tons of videos on YouTube where I'm just doing a quick batch. And you make it, you can, the youngest ferment is 3 days. So you can ferment something for 3 days. It's not going to be as potent with probiotics and all of that nutrition we talked about as if it were 7 or 10 days or 2 weeks. But it's going to be good enough. And then, you just start to add little bits to every meal. I usually recommend that like a tablespoon with first it's like a tablespoon one day, like with a meal, and then work your way up, because you can have reactions to it. Because these bugs are going to go in there. I say bugs, these microbes are going to go in there and they're going to get to work. They're going to get into your upper GI is going to have this introduction of all these guys, and they're going to come in and start eating all kinds of toxicity and helping you digest uncooked food. And undigested food. It's going to really start to help you break down and digest what you're eating. And so that can have a byproduct. That can cause bloating. That can cause a little gas. And so people go, oh, I got bloated when I had fermented foods. I don't want to have them anymore. They're not good for me. But that's like they're doing the work. So I always say just like kind of titrate down a little bit, reduce what you're having. In fact, when I was working with these children that had these disabilities, we would use eyedroppers. We've done it with infants, with newborns that have colic. We've used eyedroppers of coconut water kefir or the juice of like sauerkraut. And just tiny little bits, so potent. I've seen babies that are incredibly constipated and you give them, or even drink it yourself. And then if you're breastfeeding, it passes through the milk. You can smell that kefir in that baby's poo. It's TMI, but it's, I'm a healthy gut girl, so I talk about this stuff all the time. But it's incredible. You can smell the coconut water in their poo. And it's so powerful. It just all these things get in there, these microbes get in there, and they really go to work and do such wondrous things. So I would say that's a good place to start. There are some people who can't do fermented foods. And those are usually people, they might have a histamine reaction. They might have like watery eyes, itchy face. They might get patches on their chest. And that's not a good sign. In that case, you can't do it. Sometimes people might have like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO, or they might have irritable bowel. And that histamine reaction is something that you have to kind of heal that before you can move forward with, with doing ferments. But there are ways to heal that as well. And so, yeah, that's a good place to start. It's inexpensive. It's incredibly inexpensive, and it's pre-digested food. So it's not taxing your own digestion to consume it. And that's a plus for sure. That's a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. Cool. There's this term leaky gut. Can you share with us what a leaky gut is? And then what are some of the top reasons that almost all of us have a leaky gut?
Yeah, I learned about leaky gut when I was taking a childbirth education class. I learned about that babies have permeable guts when they're born. Like brand new babies, their guts are leaky. It's just the way it is. And then mother's milk and starts to help create these fatty acids that then help to seal the gut and close those little fissures, or however you want to call it. They could tight junctions, or what they call them. So what is really fascinating to me is then I started hearing about just everybody having leaky gut. And then in the last couple of years, I learned from the microbiologist Kiran Krishnan that if you have any kind of non-communicable disease, any kind of allergy, eczema, you have seasonal allergies, arthritis, almost anything is correlated with a leaky gut. Like you're going to have a leaky gut. That shocked me to pieces, because that means everybody has leaky gut basically. And what it means is that the integrity of the lining of the intestinal wall starts to become permeable again. It starts to sort of come apart, and in very, very, microscopic ways, if you will. Like you can't, these aren't massive lesions in the gut. And when we eat food and it's not being properly digested, it starts to sort of putrefy and get very inflamed and very acidic, and that compromises the gut further. And then these particles, these tiny little microscopic particles, get into the bloodstream, and this whole process is called endotoxemia, and it toxifies the system. Now, it can be just a little tiny thing, like a little piece of gluten, let's say, just like escapes into the bloodstream, and your body is going to launch this autoimmune response to it. It's going to have a reaction to it, which can look different to you than it does to me. It can look like eczema to me, and it can look like migraines to you. It can be vastly different from person to person, and it's really common, and it can be really advanced to where, you can't eat anything and you're bloating after every meal and your bowel movements are disrupted. It can be extremely, go into ulcerative colitis and things like this that are debilitating for people. Or it can just be this, every time I eat this, I am miserable, or every time I drink this, I'm miserable. And so it's something that we all have to start to pay attention to, unfortunately, because like you mentioned before, what compromises our gut is not just poor digestion, but the state of our food and stress. Stress is huge, and this plays a very big role in compromising our digestion. And that's what I'm ultimately about is, how are you digesting? What are you eating? How are you digesting it? Are you absorbing the nutrition from that food? And are you eliminating the waste matter from that food effectively and quickly? And what does that look like for you? And that's what I spend time doing with people, is up-regulating that process.
Wow. So those are some of the big reasons why we have leaky gut. It would be our nutrition, how we digest that food, the stress that is in our lives. Are there any other big factors for why we have a leaky gut?
Yeah, I think toxicity, we're really exposed to a lot of harmful things, especially glyphosate is so pervasive in our food, especially in America. It's hard to even get organic food that isn't tainted with glyphosate now. And so there's also a lot of studies showing GMOs, certain genetically modified foods, not all of them, but certain ones can literally poke holes in the gut.
Wow.
And this is really terrifying.
Yeah.
So this, there's like those types of toxicities and toxins that we're exposed to. And then of course we said stress, there was medications, antibiotics are just, I would say, digestion, what are you eating? The quality of food that you're eating, and stress for sure. And then this whole toxic bucket that I talk about all the time, which is like, what's in that toxic bucket? Toxins from our air, from our food, from our environment, from, our own bodies, like infection, low-grade infection. I talk about dental health. Dental health can decimate your health and you never even knew it was the thing. You can have a root canal that is a little off, it's tender, it's sore, and you've had it for years, and you're like, I don't have the money or the time, or it's not bothering me that much. Just leaking infection into your thyroid, your thymus, your lungs, your respiratory, your sinuses. I mean, this can be, sorry, I went off on another subject there entirely.
So helpful.
But it ultimately really plays a role in our gut health because, your gut is having to manage this toxic bucket for you. And dental health is a huge one. I mean, it can play a part in even heart disease and heart attacks and strokes. So I'm a big, look inside that toxic bucket and start to mitigate what's in there. Start to do damage control. Handle the thing. Don't get overwhelmed, right, by the Mount Everest. Just look in the bucket and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be drinking every night of the week. Maybe I should just go down to the weekends, or maybe I should, cut back on smoking. Those are big ones. But how about little ones? Like maybe I shouldn't be eating Jiffy peanut butter every day of the week and 2-3 tablespoons of it. Maybe I should upgrade to an almond butter, an organic one. I know it's expensive, but you shouldn't be eating that much of it anyway. Even if it's organic, you shouldn't be having that much peanut butter. I always say the serving size of almond butter is like a tablespoon. Who eats a tablespoon of nut butter? Nobody. We all eat like half the jar.
Right.
So, look in there and go, what can I, okay, I have this cracked tooth. I have some money. I should go to the dentist and get that sorted out. What else can I do? I can start walking, even 10 minutes a day, if that's all I have time for. And just start to reduce the load, because that load is ultimately going to be taken on board by your gut and all your detox organs. So that's Yeah.
So interesting, and I've always said this about health in general, how interconnected everything is. But when we talk about gut health, there's so many factors that come into play, and it can get kind of overwhelming when you hear what we're talking about, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many factors and there's so many things that have to change. And where do I start? But it goes back to what we were saying before. Just start with one step. You don't have to fix it all overnight. Just start being aware of, okay, I do this. Maybe I can do a little bit less of that. Maybe I can eliminate that from my lifestyle. Maybe I can walk a little bit more. Am I getting good enough sleep? What am I doing for my stress? And that was a big part in my life, is finding healthy ways to handle stress. I don't need to reach for the bottle every night. Maybe I'll do a little bit more meditation today. Maybe I'll do more breath work. And that's a game changer for you when you can do practices like meditation and breath work, which are natural and they're free. And they have a host of health benefits. And they help, like you said, take that load off your gut, which is where it's eventually going to come to. That is really, really powerful stuff. And it's made a big impact in my life.
I really think the work that you do is so great. And I love listening.
Thank you.
Binge listening.
Thank you.
Because, the whole meditation thing, it's so hard and I'll just be flat out honest, I'm a hyper person, and I'm going to be 52 in November, and I thought I'd calm down by now, but, and I definitely have. But one of the things that I pinpointed about it, and you talk about this, is just like sitting in the discomfort of not having that drink, like sitting in the discomfort of being like, it is so depressing to not come home and not turn on the TV and not have a drink. Like, it's depressing, or not order Thai food and get the comfort of that delivery. Like, it is really, like, when I started to pay attention, it's almost like you're staring at the enemy. Once you actually look at it, it's not as hard. Like, if you just are like, but I really just want my routine. But if you look at it and you go, okay, I'm going to look at this in the face, and I'm not going to do, and I'm going to be really bored and crave really hard for 3 hours before I go to bed. And am I going to die from it? No. Am I going to try some breath work? Okay, I can't meditate for longer than 5 minutes. That's okay. That's a long time, actually. And then you and face the enemy, face that boredom and that need to satiate yourself,
I love that you talked about that concept of boredom, because we've gotten so good at distracting ourselves, and constant stimulation and constant activity. And for a lot of us, we have lost sight of how to just sit in silence and be with ourselves and be more aware and love ourselves and take that time to get to know ourselves. There's something that I just came across like a week ago. Andrew Huberman, he has a really great podcast, and he talks a lot about the great stuff I enjoy, cold exposure and breath work, and things like dopamine and all the things that we've been talking about. And one practice that he's been incorporating lately is to turn your phone off. Not to turn it on to airplane mode, but actually turn your phone off. And he's been doing it 1 hour every odd hour. So 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 p.m., 5 p.m., 7 p.m., etc. He turns his phone off for that full hour. So a good chunk of the day, his phone is off, and it's just a really cool little challenge. And I actually haven't, truth be told, I have not tried it yet. I
thought you were going to say today. He turns it off 1 hour. I was like, I could do that.
Yeah. No, he's doing every other hour, every odd hour of the day, he turns it off. And it's just such a good practice to get into, to just be away from that technology, that constant stimulation, the dinging, the notifications, the phone calls, the texts, the Instagram messages, the Instagram scrolling. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm just like getting worked up thinking about all of it and talking
I know.
It. So,
when it went down the other day, a couple days ago, when social media was down for 6 hours or whatever.
That's right.
At first I was like, oh no, I have this to do. I have that to do. I got that time. And then I used it as an excuse to not even check my emails. And then before, like 3 hours in, I was like, it's a day off. Yes. And all of a sudden I just didn't. And then I started fantasizing. What if it never came on? What if what if it's gone forever? And I was like, okay, I'm going to plan for that. And I got really excited. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, podcasts, we have podcasts to listen to and podcasts to make.
Yep.
And I'm good with that. And, of course, email to work. And then I was really sad when it came on.
Right?
I
It really was a
was.
nice break. It was a nice break from
Yeah.
all of it. So,
Yeah.
speaking of stress, I'd love to hear a little bit more about adrenals and how that plays into our health and our gut health. So, how does supporting adrenal health increase things like energy and productivity and even improve our mental health and overcome depression?
I mean, simply put, our adrenals are our batteries. And when we are on our phones and like just what we talked about, it drains our batteries. When we're using electromagnetic frequency of any sort, even your little Fitbit, even your whatever, you compound all this electromagnetic frequency that we are exposed to, and it is draining our batteries. Then add to that emotional stress. Now we're looking back inside this bucket again, the toxic bucket. And in there are electromagnetic frequencies, and your iPhone's in there. And also, emotional stress, unhealthy relationships or just a tiff. Today, maybe it's just a tiff with your spouse or your children. One of your children is a lot. All of that stresses adrenal function. And over time, if we don't find ways, and I highly recommend, I'm hoping I get to air this episode on my show as well, because I want people to just have you on their phone, on their, to hear your podcast, because I feel like that's not in my wheelhouse and it's something I miss and I need more of, which is always having that information on how to manage your stress in different ways to do it. Because unless you find that way to do that, including mitigating because infection also drains your battery and your batteries. So unless we find ways to do damage control here, you're going to, if you aren't already in some level of adrenal exhaustion. And that has a cascading domino effect on all of your endocrine system. So that's going to, in order to make cortisol, which is the one of the hormones your adrenals make, it needs to pull from progesterone. And so progesterone helps to make cortisol. And if you are constantly making, and goes for men, so if you're constantly making cortisol because you're in the fight or flight all the time because of your toxic bucket, that progesterone is being depleted. That means your estrogen and your progesterone that are always doing this balance dance, always in men and women, they have to be opposing each other at all times. Now your progesterone is dropped and your estrogen is dominating, even if you have low levels of estrogen. Now your estrogen is controlling the show and running amok. And I always say progesterone is the lion tamer to the lion, which is the estrogen in everybody, even children. And so this game, this little thing that happens with our progesterone is overlooked by even endocrinologists, even it's overlooked by OBGYNs, it's overlooked by people a lot because they think of progesterone as a pregnancy hormone and they don't realize that how crucial it is in the role that our adrenal health is playing in our bodies. And so it's fundamentally important to support adrenal function. And the adrenals need 6 basic things. Everything else is just extra credit. But they need, you need to be hydrated. So I always say half your weight in ounces in water every day. I know that's hard for a lot of people, but you got to start trying to do that. You need good, healthy sea salt or pink salt, Himalayan salt. The adrenals alone, I think, need like a teaspoon a day. And so I like to put salt in my water. If you're an athlete or you sweat a lot, definitely add it to your water. And then you need magnesium. I try to avoid magnesium citrate. And you need, magnesium glycinate. You need B vitamins. You need vitamin C. And you need sleep. You need sleep. And that's a catch-22, isn't it? Because a lot of people can't sleep because their cortisol is high, and they can't bring their cortisol down because they're not sleeping. So
Yeah.
it's like a rock and a hard place. But you can do those other 5 first. You can start working on supporting adrenal function and with those things, and then sleep will come, you know? So it's those are the basics, and it can be more complicated in that. The more advanced someone is into adrenal exhaustion, adrenal fatigue, and then, further on with that sort of, also PTSD and trauma and stuff like that can really have an ongoing impact on adrenal function throughout life. So those people need extra care where that's concerned. But yeah, it's a whole charging your battery moral to the story. Charge your batteries.
I'm just curious that you mentioned the 6 different things that the adrenals need, and you mentioned magnesium. Is there a reason why you avoid magnesium citrate?
Magnesium citrate's not one of it's kind of like a junky magnesium. It's like it doesn't absorb all that well, which is why it loosens the bowels easily. It just goes right through a lot of people. It also, you can get into the weeds with this topic, which talks about how it upsets ceruloplasmin, which is a master antioxidant in the body, and that upsets the mineral balance of the body. And so, so I just prefer to use magnesium glycinate and magnesium threonate. There's a lot of really good magnesiums out there. Different types that are much better than mag citrate, even though it's the most common. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good to know. And there was a few other things. What were the first few that you mentioned that that the adrenals need every day?
So hydration, so water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what was the other one after that?
B vitamin, salt.
Salt. That's what I was going to ask about. Mm-hmm. So salt traditionally has always gotten a bad rap. What do we need to know about salt in terms of what types of salt we should be getting, and then why is there such a negative connotation to salt?
Well, I think that salt, iodized table salt, it has anti-caking agents in it. It's purposefully iodized. They actually add the supplement to it. I'm not a fan of fortifying things like that. I think you should try to get iodine from natural sources. And some companies even, bleach the salt to clean it. So it's just not the highest quality. In fact, most salt is sold in industrial capacity to salt roads and things like that. And that's the same salt that they're basically putting on the shelf for you to buy. So we need salt. Our kidneys have a potassium sodium pump in them to make them work. They need salt. Our adrenals need salt. Our bodies we desperately need salt. And we get a lot of it naturally in our food because it's such a pervasive mineral that sodium is such a pervasive mineral that's in our food, so it's there, but we're so depleted in it as well. And so I think also they heat the salt, which isn't good. I know that that's a big problem. And so natural salt is something that we're all, pretty depleted in. Now, some people say, well, I eat tons of chips and I'm always craving. And that's usually why, is because you're craving salt and you're not getting it from the crappy salt that's on that particular product or that's being put into the processed and packaged foods that we're eating. So when I cook, I don't salt the food till after I've, it depends. If it's like a piece of meat or something, I will salt it to cook it. But usually, like if I make a pot of bone broth or I make a big soup, I won't salt it until I actually am eating it so that I can add a profuse amount of sea salt in it.
Yeah.
And, if you have too much salt, you generally will get loose bowels, too much healthy salt. Mm-hmm. If someone drinks salt and they get edema from it, that's a person that needs to back off on salt for now and support kidney function. So that, and again, I can go off in the weeds in that, but when you eat like Chinese food and you get swollen and you can't take your rings off and stuff like that's edema. And if you always get it, that's an ongoing issue that's screaming kidney support. kidneys need support. But the average person can do, easily a couple of teaspoons of salt in a day, healthy sea salt, salting, salad, salt, put it in your water, things like this, especially if you do sweat therapies, if you do any kind of sauna and you're athletic, absolutely. And it's kind of the concept behind Gatorade and stuff, it's just like salt depletion. It's a electrolyte depletion, and salt is the perfect way to upregulate that, the need for that.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I appreciate you mentioning the idea of if you're into sauna use, which I know a lot of people in my community are, you're losing that, through sweating, and it's important to replenish. And the reason why I wanted to reiterate that point around salt is because it really has gotten a bad rap across the board. It seems like, you see on packages, reduce salt, and just in general, people are trying to reduce salt in their cooking or their intake. And there's this messaging around it that just doesn't seem to be adding up. So it's interesting to hear that.
It's like the fat, remember when
That's
fat
right.
was so
Low
bad
fat.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are fats that are bad, and there are salts that are bad, and there are foods that are laden with salt that are bad. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, every living organism really needs the balance of these minerals in the body, and that's very important. One of them. Also for digestion, hydrochloric acid in the stomach is made with zinc and sodium, and in fact, my mom said this to me. I just thought of this now. When we were kids, we would go out and play, and come inside all sweaty and sunned, and she said she would lick my shoulder here and see if it was salty or not. And we're from New Mexico. We're part Native American. My mom was into some wacky stuff. She'd lick and if it wasn't salty, she would have us lick our hand, and she would pour salt on it, and we would just like lick our hand, because she knew innately that we were depleted and we had sweat a lot, and she knew we needed to replace it. And the reason that's important is because that salt has to come in and support the other things I said, the adrenals and the kidneys, but also to produce hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which is going to protect and disinfect and help you digest. And there we go again, back to domino number one. And so when people come to me and say, my kid has terrible digestion and he's only 6, should I give him hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes? I'm like, no, give him salt, and give him loads of salt, because that's going to help him make it still. Whereas when you're older, your ability to make hydrochloric acid gets depleted quite a bit. But a 6, 7-year-old can still make it if they have adequate salt in their bodies.
It's so interesting, and that's such a neat thing that you were exposed to as a child, that your mom knew of something that was pretty obvious to her, but you probably didn't understand it necessarily as a child. And then as you got older, you're like, that's why. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I keep saying salt, and I mean salt, but sodium chloride is what I was like, why aren't those words popping into my head? The sodium chloride, and when the body uses the sodium chloride, it takes the chloride bond, the chloride molecule, and it makes hydrochloric sodium chloride, hydrochloric acid. And then it takes the sodium, and then that goes to the sodium potassium pump in the kidneys, and it goes to the, to support the adrenals. It's magic. It really is magic.
It is. And like I had said earlier, everything's so interconnected, which is just so fascinating. Very cool. Well, Kitty, this is awesome. Before I get to my last question, where can people learn more about you? I know you have a really awesome podcast that you can plug here. And where else can people go to learn more about you?
I am on healthygutgirl.com, and I'm on Instagram. I do a lot of mini blogs, so I have a lot of free info on there, and that's healthygutgirl_. You have to spell it out completely, because I have been shadow banned because I am so dangerous and my information is so controversial. I talk about vitamin C healing people and stuff. It's really scandalous.
Yeah, right?
So you have to spell the whole thing out. And then my podcast is called Stuff Your Doctor Should Know, for obvious reasons. And then I have a gift for your listeners, which is healthygutgirl.com/gift. And there's my podcast, my newsletter, some free info, a list of some foods some gut-friendly foods, and all kinds of fun stuff.
Very cool. I appreciate that. I'll have that all linked up too, so anyone listening can find that and check it out.
Nice.
Cool. So my last question for you, Kitty, is what does health mean to you?
Mm. Well, I think 2 years ago, I had a different answer for you. I think that would have been different than now after this event.
Mm.
And now it is to freely pursue thriving for what I think thriving is. So to freely pursue thriving for my human sovereign body.
Mm.
That's what it means. And so
Mm.
that may not be the same for you. I 2 years ago, I would have been like, oh, health means the healthy gut, and health means health. It's what you, however you perceive thriving, whatever is going to make you thrive, for you to freely pursue that. That's what health is.
I love that answer. It's so well said, and it's so relatable because, like you said, with the events happening in the last almost 2 years now, which is hard to believe, hard to say out loud.
Yeah.
We have been restricted in many ways, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of getting into politics, but we have been restricted on what we want to do and what we love. And aside from that, I see people in my life, family members that aren't able to do things that they love, aren't able to thrive because they're not healthy. And as soon as you can pay attention to that and make change, then you're free to really step into that life and that lifestyle that allows you to thrive and be happy and joyful and abundant and all those great things. So I really appreciate that
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. That's the silver lining of all this, is that we've all been given this beautiful opportunity to pursue the things that they're trying to take away, is to
Right.
pursue health in our own right, our own God-given
So well,
right.
yes, so well said. Well, Katie, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and everything you've shared with my audience today. I really appreciate you.
Oh, yay. I appreciate you and your work. I'm so happy. I love, people who have been through journeys and then are sharing it. These are the
Mm.
educators and the doctors of the future, I think, teaching people how to be well this way. It's so good. So thank you for
Oh,
having me.
that's so kind. I really appreciate it. Awesome. Well, have a great day.
Thank you.